So tonight I want to talk about purification, cultivation, and refuge. Starting with the refuge part, because we chant these verses every night. And what did the Buddha mean by refuge? When he was quite old, he was 80, he knew he was going to die soon. So the Buddha went all over India, all that part of India where he had been wandering for 40 years, and met with all the bhikkhus and the lay people and his supporters and the larger sangha, making sure everybody understood the teachings. And by reading the stories of his death and the time leading up to that, you get the sense of this man was a rock star. Everywhere he went, people were coming and competing with each other to offer him meals, and it would have been quite a scene. And at that time, there's a story of him and one of his chief disciples, Ananda, who was his basic, he took care of the Buddha. And so Ananda asked the Buddha a number of questions and was very, very devoted about asking them in this period of time. And you get this sense of the Buddha is like, oh, just all these people needing me to tell them what to do. It must have been exhausting. And he says to Ananda in answer to the questions, he says, "This is my 80th year and my life is spent." And he goes on to talk about how his body was like a broken down old cart held together, we say in English, with spit and a prayer. And then he says to Ananda, he says, "Therefore, be islands unto yourselves, refuges unto yourselves, seeking no external refuge." It's very moving, isn't it? And he says, with the Dhamma as your island and refuge. And in that word Dhamma, there is so much. It means the way things are, and it means his teachings, the Buddha's teaching. The mind immediately takes this and says, well, how do I do that? Because particularly when we're practicing, and maybe it's a new practice or we're in a new place, it's natural to want refuge outside. We want somebody to tell us what to do. I remember going to U Pandita with this kind of mind state, and he just barked at me. He says, "Why do you need me? You know what to do." So this is not what we want to hear, and I'm sure this was not what Ananda wanted to hear. And life is the way it is. Now what do we do with it? What do we do with the practice to make the practice a refuge? Another beloved teacher of mine, Munindraji, used to say, the Dhamma protects those who protect the Dhamma. And what he meant by that was practice. Protecting the Dhamma simply meant do the practice. The path is actually quite simple. As I described last night, there's the path of insight, the path of concentration, and this metta practice is the path of concentration. So, by doing the practice, we create a refuge, we create a place of safety. So, from the Dhammapada, it says, cultivate the wholesome, refrain from the unwholesome, purify the mind. This is the teaching of all the Buddhas. So this is a very short version, a very short summary that the Buddha offers us about the whole of the practice. Whether we're doing vipassana bhavana or metta bhavana, we're cultivating the wholesome, refraining from the unwholesome, and purifying the mind. This is an essential element to understand about the practice. This is what we're doing here. Because in answer to, life is now what, we're presented with a choice. Greed, aversion, delusion, or generosity, open-heartedness, clarity.
Lovely
Greed,
one.
hatred, or delusion.
I said that.
Generosity, open-heartedness, and clarity. So we do have a choice. What do we want to feed? And what do we want to starve? And as I said last night, the nature of the pure mind is metta and insight. So by choosing the opposites of greed, hatred, and delusion, by cultivating those, we're clearing the way so that the nature of the mind is revealed. So first there's that cultivation. And this is what we tend to think of as practice. And I really want to focus in on one aspect of that cultivation. Because as you know by now, in the metta practice, there's this constant inclination. We're constantly inclining the mind away from the unwholesome towards the wholesome. In this way, unplugging from unwholesome habits and feeding the wholesome ones. And in doing this, what we are actually getting more and more skilled at is one limb of the Eightfold Path, right effort. So that's what I want to hone in on now, tonight, is talking about right effort as an aspect of the path as it pertains to our metta practice. So right effort, we tend to think of the word effort and we think, trying, using our energy. But right effort is not how much energy we use, but what we use it in the service of, what we use it for. So you might remember the passage I quoted last night about dosa, about, actually I'll speak it. The Buddha saying, I don't see even one other thing on account of which ill will is abandoned. I do not see even one other thing on account of which ill will is abandoned. So much as the liberation of mind by loving kindness. And then he says, if you attend to this carefully, unarisen ill will does not arise, and arisen ill will is abandoned. That's a perfect description of two of the limbs, of the four limbs of right effort. Right effort has four parts, and it's all about whether we're cultivating the wholesome or the unwholesome. So what that passage I read again tonight, that I also read last night, is about how we deal with the unwholesome. So if unwholesome mind states have already arisen, we abandon them or refrain from feeding them. And with latent unwholesome states, we discourage them from arising. And then there's the flip side of the coin. So with wholesome states, we cultivate those that have already arisen. I was wrong. We cultivate those that have yet to arise, the latent ones. And we maintain the ones that have already arisen. So cultivate the wholesome. Refrain from the unwholesome. So, right effort, how we use our energy, not how much we use. Especially any of us who've practiced in Asia, we're used to hearing the Asian teachers say, please make more effort. And every time we chant the refuges and precepts in Burma, at the end, the teacher, the Sayadaw, says, apamadena sampadeta. And these are the last words of the Buddha. And they mean, please strive with diligence. And you think, the Buddha could have said anything when he was dying. He was a Buddha. He didn't just say rubbish. So please strive with diligence. It's like we take this on as his parting gift to us. And then as Westerners, we go out of balance with it. When I went forth into the nun's life, U Pandita said to me, "Now you are a soldier in the army of the Dhamma. No mercy to the kilesas." And I was like, yes, give me my weapon. Now you are a soldier in the army of the Dhamma. No mercy to the kilesas. I was ready to go out there and to practice diligently. I was going to be more diligent than any other yogi there. That's not what he meant. What he meant was cultivate the wholesome, refrain from the unwholesome, purify the mind. He absolutely didn't mean take the practice and use it to cultivate unwholesome mind states, which is where I went with it. It went to greed. I'm going to attain Nibbana in the shortest possible time. It went to aversion. No mercy to the kilesas. I mean, this was like, I'm going to kill them all. Their heads off before they even get a chance to arise. And it certainly fed delusion. Because I put on this armor of a diligent yogi. Diligent yogis are equanimous. Diligent yogis are the first yogis in the hall and the last ones out at night. Diligent yogis can sit longer than anybody else. Diligent yogis sit with pain without complaint. And I did all this stuff, totally in denial about what I really felt. Forcing the mind into this place of really strong concentration and strong mindfulness, which had its own benefit, but the intention was all wrong. And so I can remember thinking when getting up from a very long sitting and the body was just like, oh man, I was thinking, I'm pretty equanimous with this. And it was this sense of amazement that I could sit there for hours. Wow, I did that. That's amazing. And there was this little voice that I wasn't listening to was like, it's really too much. Can we just chill out a little bit? And I had the same mind state towards intense fear, which was also coming up in the practice. Wow, I'm pretty equanimous with that too. And I'm not denying there actually was some equanimity. It wasn't that it was absent. But what I wasn't seeing was the little voice about the fear. It was like, honey, don't push this. Don't push yourself into this corner. And I didn't listen to it. Mm-hmm. I tell these stories on myself because I've made those mistakes and I've learned from them. And I hope that you don't make the same mistakes. Because, as I said last night, the first noble truth is dukkha, and we have to get acquainted with it. And as it says in the Metta Sutta that we chanted this morning, ujucha, sujucha, we need to be straight, very straight.
What do you mean straight?
Honest. So be honest with ourselves about what's really going on and not what we want to be going on. Not trying to overlay our aspiration on our actual experience. So understanding that feeding the wholesome and starving the unwholesome can look messy, but it's honest. So we need to know when what are we paying attention to? And why are we paying attention to it? For what purpose? So in the metta practice in particular, if something arises that, seems to interrupt the practice, and we turn the attention to that, we acknowledge it. Do we acknowledge it with the wish that it might go away if we pay attention to it? Or to make something else arise? Or do we acknowledge it just to care? As I said last night. So unwholesome mind states will arise in the practice. It is unavoidable. So that acceptance, that profound acceptance internally and externally that I spoke about last night, is what plays out when we exercise right effort. So it's not about trying really hard or making a lot of effort. It's about turning the mind honestly in an open way to what is actually happening. So, say boredom arises, or restlessness, or irritation. We can pause in the practice if it's really strong and just acknowledge, oh, boredom. May I be at ease anyway? That's right effort. Wrong effort in this case is, oh, boredom. What do I do to make it go away? Or how do I adjust the practice so that I'm back on track? And that last question can actually be wholesome, but notice the quality of your thought when that question floats through your mind. Is it like, I want this to go away? Exactly. It's like, wow, boredom. Boredom feels like this. May I be at ease anyway? There's so much kindness in that. And kindness is always, always wholesome. So, right effort requires first surrender that I spoke about last night, acknowledging what has arisen with patience, even if it's unwholesome. It's just an unwholesome mind state. It's not intrinsically a problem. The problem part is our overlay onto it. That's the aversion and the greed. And right effort looks like, after that kind acknowledgement, not feeding it directly. So, say it's boredom, not feeding it directly means, oh, okay, I'm bored, I'm going to go do something else. And then not feeding it indirectly either. And indirect feeding of boredom is making it a problem. If we make it a problem, we're actually feeding it. Any resistance makes what we're resisting a bigger deal. So first we discern what's wholesome and unwholesome. And then we find our own way, our own path, making an island unto ourselves, to unplug from the unwholesome and encourage the wholesome. This is not a strategy that is fixed or rigid. Because we're all different. This is why we need to be islands unto ourselves, refuges unto ourselves. Everybody's way of working with wholesome and unwholesome is their own path. So nobody can give us a recipe. Now do this, you do this, and you do this, and you'll be right. It doesn't work that way. And the bottom line is all conditioned phenomena arise and pass away out of our control. Wholesome states, unwholesome states. So as far as unwholesome states passing away, it's not our job to cause that to happen. It'll happen by itself if we don't feed those unwholesome states, either directly or indirectly. So we can't stage manage our practice. It just happens with its own direction and its own momentum. And just as it's not our job to make unwholesome mind states go away, it's not our job to make wholesome mind states arise. They will arise in their own time, depending on conditions and karma. But we can create the conditions that encourage them to arise. That's what right effort often boils down to in the practice. This is why I love that metaphor about planting seeds. Because if you plant seeds, they'll grow. And if you plant apple seeds, you're going to get an apple tree. You won't get a mango tree. It doesn't work that way. So we have to be diligent. This is true. But it needs to be gentle diligence, kind diligence, wise diligence. There needs to be that discernment in there. A teacher I love very much, Sayadaw Vivekananda, a German monk, a student of U Pandita's, says, if you have casual practice, you're going to have casual results. And what casual practice looks like is a lack of continuity. It's not about how much effort we make. So if your mind is all over the place, you're really, really restless, and you kindly acknowledge, oh, restlessness has arisen, may I be at ease with this. And you start again, perhaps 200 times in an hour. Maybe there's no connection, maybe there's no metta arising, but there's this diligent, kind, patient, starting again, one moment at a time. That's what diligent practice looks like. Not forcing yourself to feel anything or experience anything differently, but just patiently picking it up again and again and again. Picking up the phrase, for the 100th time. Or maybe you're so restless, you only pick up the phrase twice in a whole hour, but you've had a half an hour of wandering around in your mind. But that's okay. You picked it up at once. That's diligence. Doing the best we can with what we have is diligence. And it's soft, kind, patient. Maintaining that continual inclination to metta. Because we can't control the mind. We can't control it at all. That's not its nature. It's not ours to control. But it's like we have it on a gentle leash. Think of it like training a really curious, intelligent, cute puppy. You know how cute puppies are, but they're all over the place. So we're not disappointed in the puppy when it, chews the furniture or whatever puppies do, because that's their nature. Or we have it on a lead and we're trying to take it for a walk and it's just all over the place.
Oppure ce l'abbiamo.
That's also what puppies do. When we train a puppy, there's this good humor about, oh yeah, this is the way puppies are. Same. So, right effort is that continual kind inclination. And we use everything in the service of that. Sound, sight, there's this beautiful flexibility. We don't block out the world. So in your daily activities in the metta practice, we don't instruct people to, like in the Vipassana practice, it's like restrain the eyes, restrain the ears, go around really slowly and don't pay attention to anything outside. We don't say that in the metta practice. Because almost every sound that comes in, for example, sound, is created by some being. So in our general activities, we hear a bird and it's like, oh, may that bird be happy. Or we hear the sound of a machine and we think, oh, wow, may whoever is driving that machine be safe and protected. Same with sight. So in our general activities, we see each other. Maybe we're not looking at each other, but we see each other. And maybe there's somebody we see and they're agitated and kind of noisy. When we're cultivating metta, there can be this natural and really wholehearted inclination, wow, may that person be okay. And so the mind really begins to eagerly go to metta because it's such a joyful state. Donatella and I were sharing a few words after the talk last night. And I saw this plane go overhead.
Sì.
And I'm like, Donatella, look. There's a plane. I love planes. Look, 200 people up there. May you be happy. There's this childlike joy in wanting people to be happy. And I can tell you completely honestly, that didn't used to be my habit. I would have seen the vapor trails and gone, damn planes, there are too many planes, there are too many people, I wish that, I would have been in a really instantly thinking about climate and how horrible the world is and why are people so greedy. I wouldn't have been thinking about metta. So in the cultivation of metta, we become skilled in what's good, as it's said in the Metta Sutta. In spite of our bad habits, we create a metta habit. And it says in the commentary to the Metta Sutta, one aspect of being skilled in what's good is one who really just genuinely wants to cultivate right effort.
Si dice, say that again, split it.
One aspect of skilled in what's good is that one becomes somebody who genuinely wishes to cultivate right effort. So you see these are all bound together, that you can't separate any of this stuff out. And this cultivation leads to purification. Because what do we purify again? We purify the mind and heart of unwholesome mind states. when we cultivate over and over and again, and when we create these metta habits, we purify all those unwholesome, unhelpful habits based in greed, hatred, delusion. In Burma, we don't do our laundry in a machine. We do it in a bucket. So you take your clothes and you put them in the bucket and you fill it with water and a little laundry soap and you let it soak. And after a while, you swish it around with your hands and you kind of knead it.
E poi si
Like bread.
lavorano.
And then all the dirt arises to the top and you see it all. The unwholesome stuff comes to the surface and you can see it. I think you know where I'm going with this metaphor, because isn't this what's been happening today? Applying right effort patiently, persistently, and all this stuff starts coming up. And we tend to want to avoid unpleasant things. It's a paradox. Both we don't want them to arise, but if they have arisen, we're hardwired, actually. It's a neurological fact that we tend to overfocus on the negative. So in this purification process, as we apply right effort and things begin to come up, it's natural to overfocus on that. And that's actually a way of feeding that negativity. So feeding the wholesome, starving the unwholesome. When these things come up, applying right effort is the only thing you need to remember. Notice if there's reactivity and embrace that with kindness as well. Notice if you're over-focusing and acknowledge that and understand, well, that's a neurological fact of life, but I don't have to do that. And by applying right effort, by this kind of kind non-involvement, we just allow this stuff to float away, just like the scum that arises in your laundry. And when you do your laundry like that, you don't look at the bucket and then spend a long time going, wow, look how much dirt is in there. Let me look at this dirt. No, you just pour it out. And the pouring it out is that non-involvement. It's just like, oh, that's what that is. May I be at ease anyway. Again, not to make it go away, but just let it go away by itself, because it will. And as we go through each category, you'll see different flavors of things coming up. And because this cultivation of metta is arranged the way it is, we start where it's easy and go step by step to where it's harder. So we see craving, we see delusion, and we see all the different flavors of aversion and dosa. It can be a bumpy ride, but that's not a bad thing. But of course we don't say this in the flyer for the retreat. Nobody would come. But it's so powerful what happens to the heart and mind. So deep and so beautiful. And the mind begins, as I said, to joyfully go to metta as a habit. And it happens by itself. From the Anguttara Nikaya, the Buddha said this: abandon the unwholesome. If it were not possible, I would not ask you to do it. Develop the wholesome. If it were not possible, I would not ask you to do it. It's been hard. Even when the Buddha was there, it was hard. Not just us. And we can't sit back and go, boy, if I had a really good teacher, if the Buddha were my teacher. No, it was hard then. It's hard now. But it is possible. So the Buddha said, it is possible, so I ask you to do it. And as I said, we need patience for it to take the time it takes. Because if you've planted mango seeds, it takes a while for a mango tree to grow big enough for fruit to ripen. And Munindraji used to say, with the practice, you don't have to do anything but sit under the mango tree and wait for the fruit to fall. The fruit will ripen in their own time, and then all we have to do is sit there and they fall. It's very true. It's true about mangoes, and it's true about the practice. So the heart will open, I guarantee it. The heart will open as wide as the world, given time and practice and patience. So may we all have the time and practice and patience to develop this heart that's a boundless heart of loving kindness. Thank you for your kind attention, everybody.
E che tutti noi si possa avere il tempo